I'm Sander Van Oker, and this is Newsleaders, a series of television interviews assembled by the staff of the Poynter Institute with the men and the women who've had a major influence on the news that you see and read. Some are well-known, others are not so well-known, but each has played an important role in the shaping of modern American journalism. The first person to lead off this year's series is very well-known. Ben Bradlee is famous not simply because he's the executive editor of the Washington Post. He's also famous because Jason Robards played Bradlee in the movie All the President's Men, the story of how the Washington Post uncovered the Watergate scandal. The fame and the notoriety that resulted from the coverage was, as Bradlee explains in the interview, a mixed blessing. But it took the Washington Post from the position of being a major newspaper to the position of being a great newspaper, which had been Bradlee's ambition when he came over from Newsweek to be the Post managing editor in 1965, becoming executive editor in 1968. It's been quite a run, even for a Harvard man.
The really first lesson that a journalist has to learn is that it ain't necessarily so, just because somebody says it is. I mean, I can remember the first day I learned that in the business, and some chief of police in Manchester, New Hampshire, threw me down the stairs because he had said that, I think they set a trap for some rapist, and the trap went wrong, and the bait in this trap was in fact raped. And he had said that that was not true, and we learned that it was. And I said, I couldn't believe that somebody, some big official, and that was the biggest official in my town, had lied. I couldn't believe it. And I think you have to be cynical. I hope you don't get so cynical that you don't believe anybody and that you won't allow your mind to be swayed. You've got to be able to change your mind in this business about stories and about people, but it ain't necessarily so because the President of the USA looks you in the eye and says it is. That we know. I joined the Post way back on Christmas Eve of 1948, believe it or not. And I had been up in New Hampshire with a bunch of people who started a newspaper after the war. And we went broke and sold it. And I went looking for a job, and I got a job at the Washington Post as a beginning reporter. I worked there for 2.5 years, and then went to Europe as a short-lived diplomat. I was the press attaché in the embassy in Paris, and was generally considered to be a disaster as a public official. And I started looking for a job as soon as I could, and I found a job at Newsweek, and I stayed at Newsweek for 12 years, and then came back to the Post. I joined the newspaper business for a lot of reasons, but certainly the major reason was that you thought that if you could find the truth and share the truth with readers, that readers would be better informed, and that a better informed world is a better world. So I think that the impact that a newspaper has is to leave it just a little bit better than it was when you found it. The power of the Washington Post lies first and above all in the fact that it is published in the capital of the free world. It's a geographic power. I mean, if we were in Omaha, we would not be as powerful as we are. We have become a virtual monopoly newspaper in the capital of the free world. And no matter who was the editor or what paper was published, it would have a great influence. Well, I think the real power of the press and the real power of the Post is its ability to focus the attention of key decision makers. When the ultimate history of Watergate is written, that's the contribution of the Post. We really focused for 6 months in the beginning. We focused our attention. I think most editors thought we were crazy. beyond its impact as a story. I mean, it was the dream story. You could have, editors can live to be 1,000 years old and they won't see another one like that. It's had other fallout in that it gave us and it gave the paper itself a kind of notoriety and a high profile that hasn't been unilaterally blessing. Woodward and Bernstein and Kay and me and a few other people have trouble going places now because you're spotted as for who the hell you are. I can't go watch the demonstration in front of the Washington Post because I'm too good a target. And especially after that movie that they made. You know, I mean, if I meet someone new, it's odds on that they'll say, well, you don't look like Jason Robards. I think without the tapes that it would always have been a question in people's mind whether, you know, what he had done and whether to believe the Washington Post and by then half the rest of the press, or believe the president. And my great fear was that it was going to end up in a kind of a never-never land of where nobody could prove anything. But my friend Edward Bennett Williams, said that he loves rogues too, and he would have loved Nixon as a client. And he would have burned the tape. He would have advised the president to burn the tapes. And then he said, he was probably making this up, but he said that he would then have called a press conference in which he would have got the president to say that I realized that mistakenly I'd intruded on the decision-making process and had done something that was not good for the country by intruding, and therefore I destroyed them. And then he would have thumped his nose. The Pentagon Papers seem so remote and such a non-big deal today. It was critically important in the history of the Washington Post. It really was, because it was the first time that the quote new team of Catherine and Bradlee had faced a real major issue together. And how that was decided was much more important than we realized. I mean, after that, we had tremendous faith in each other's judgment, which we had but had never been tested before. Before that, we were both of us learning our trade in one sense. You know, we'd been humping and working hard, but we hadn't had a crisis situation where the whole world spotlight was on us and where we were going to court. And we knew we were going to court. I mean, there was no doubt about what would happen to us if we published the Pentagon Papers. I admired Catherine so much that time when she was really, her lawyer, her most trusted lawyer, was saying, I don't know, but I don't think I would. Left her a little out, and there we were just hammering her just as hard as we could, saying, you just got to. You won't play in the big leagues if you don't. And her just, over the telephone, listening and saying, finally, let's go. I mean, and she had moved onto the bargaining table much more than the Post, or much more. If we had been found guilty of that, if we'd lost that suit, they would have presumably gone after us criminally. If they'd convicted, they'd gone after our Florida television stations, as you remember. If we had been convicted of treason, was really the statute criminally. You can't be a convicted felon and own television stations. So, there was $100 million on the table. The only saving grace in the Janet Cooke scandal is that the world doesn't know anything about the Janet Cooke case that the Washington Post didn't tell them. We decided immediately, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke Joe Pulitzer up and said, there's a disaster and we're sending you back your prize. And Joe couldn't believe it. He said, well, it'll pass over or something. And I said, no, it won't pass over. And it's gone out, Federal Express, that night. We immediately assigned our ombudsman and said, you have total access to everybody, and you will not be censored. And you write it as, just explain it, explain everything. And it was written, and there's never, I mean, that was the definitive word. There's no other word. If editors think that they can avoid that, I take my hat off to them. There's absolutely no way you can avoid disaster if somebody wants to lie to you. You just, there's no foolproof system. You can catch them in most of the lies, but that was such a lie that nobody could conceive of it. Also, there were some interesting things about that. There was an artist's drawing. You know, the story was about an 8-year-old heroin addict. There was an artist's drawing of that kid, and it was one of those extremely vivid pictures, and it ran on the front page of the paper. And I think it made us all feel that we knew this kid, Jimmy, a given name. Also, the mayor on the following day said he knew who Jimmy was. And any guard that we might have had went totally down when the mayor of your city says he knew it was. And there was a psychiatrist, I think, or a drug counselor at Howard University who said 2 days later that she was treating the family. I mean, it didn't occur to us that it didn't exist. I mean, in light of those evidences. Well, all administrations are outraged by the difficulties of keeping a secret. That's, in my experience, that's a constant. They've tapped a few phones in the past to, I think in Kennedy's administration, they tapped some phones to try to find, they tapped Lloyd Norman's phone at Newsweek to try to find where he got some information. It's history, the lesson of history is that it never works, and I think it acts as a goad to people to get more information out. I don't know quite what they're up to in this. I think that this crowd would like an Official Secrets Act. And I don't think they're going to get it. I hope they don't. And I'm going to fight against it. But God damn it, when somebody looks you in the eye who is in a position to know these things and tells you that you're risking the lives of Americans, that's a red light you go through very carefully. We have a system that we developed years ago this is for deciding whether to print a story or not print a story when the claim of national security has been invoked. And we decide to print it. Just that decision, regardless of whether we eventually print it or not, we decide to print it. And that allows us to proceed to get the thing written. Otherwise, you're going to spend 6 weeks arguing about it, and then you finally say go, and somebody said, oh, hell, I haven't written it yet. So we get it, we start the process of getting it written. Checks being made, research being done, and all that. Then we convene a group of people who are as expert as we have on the subject. If it's in the Middle East, we get all the guys that we have in the paper who are experts in the Middle East. And they are charged with trying to talk us out of it. And so we have these debates, in which it seems to me that I am often on both sides of it. Reporters develop relationships with their sources. That's just a fact. It's no great profound statement that it can be hate. Sometimes you cover a mayor that you can't stand or a governor you can't stand. It can be affection. It can be esteem. It occasionally has been a sexual relationship. The problem is not the relationship. The problem is the inability of the reader to know about the relationship. John Kennedy bought a house that was 3 or 4 doors down from my house in 1958, I think. I mean, we're talking of damn near 30 years ago. And I had not known him at Harvard College. I was introduced to him, I think, a week before he bought this house. And so he became a kind of neighbor, and he obviously was a growing figure in an area which I was covering as a journalist. And we got to be friends. He was 4 or 5 years older than I am, but we had children the same age, and we had wives who were friends, and so we became friends. After he was elected president, as he once said, it's very hard to make new friends. And so he sort of took the friends he had with him. I think that rattled me at a time, that relationship. You really have to confront it head on, and I think I ducked it for a couple of months anyway, probably a year. Decide whether you are a friend of a president or a journalist. And I'd forgotten the issue that it was made crystal clear to me that I was a journalist, and I got put in a doghouse for 3 or 4 months and went from seeing them regularly, I almost always saw them together, to not going at all, and then but Kennedy understood it much better than people know. What is our role in invading privacy? What's the fine line between the invasion of privacy and the public's right to know? I mean, these are subjects that we all debate at boring length, I think. It's enough that you tell young reporters to sensitize them to that. Watch out for crossing that line. Identify the line first. Know that you're doing it. Know that you're approaching that thing. And it seems to me that you won't be a reporter very long if you constantly overstep it. I mean, somebody will belt you one in the first place. And but in my list of worries, that's fairly far down.
Alternative.
I'm more worried about the relationship of the press and government, to working that out, rather than I am worried about the relationship of the press and the public. I think the public eventually works that out pretty well, it seems to me. They get terribly involved with their newspapers, more than their television screens. I mean, you don't see many people throwing boots at their TV screen. And I worry less about credibility than some of my colleagues. That doesn't mean I don't worry about it, but I think that all this money spent in surveys, which tend to show that the public is suspicious of us and doesn't like us, could be better spent doing something else. We're not supposed to be liked. Where is it written that we have to be loved? I can show you as many, the last studies that I've seen show that we're about as, we're more popular than businessmen, we're more popular in society than congressmen, we're less popular than the military, and the church. That doesn't seem to be bad. I don't think anything's wrong with that. We've got a lot of jobs to do, but one of them is not be loved. We don't have to be loved. We have to be respected, I think. It seems to me that the number of people who are trying to keep the Post accountable is increasing by leaps and bounds. You have accuracy in media, you have this organization, that organization, you have the Washington Journalism Review, you have the Columbia Journalism Review, you have the press sections of the magazines. It seems to me that somebody's asking me some question, some reporter is asking me some question about the Post every day. So I think at least the high-profile papers are approaching not perfection and accountability, but they really, and again, that paper is out there for 24 hours. If you've made a mistake, you've got to eat it. And it doesn't taste good. The Post writes longer stories than many newspapers because we love good writing, and we think that there is a percentage of our audience that wants to go all the way to the end of a story. We think of our audience as being very fragmented. If one of those long stories is read about by 15% of our audience, we feel that that's worth doing. It's if we run a long feature story about Angola, probably the percentage of people who follow us all the way is less than that. but we still feel that we will inform those that 10% if we get. The old days, you used to say that you were taught that editors and editors' personalities should be in the background. It should make no difference. Editors weren't very well known in society. A handful of them were, but most of them were owners. Today, I think the personality of an editor gets in the equation. It's just, at least I think it has in this newspaper, because the paper has been, the Washington Post has been at the center of so much of what has passioned America in the last 20 years, that I think the personality, my personality, comes to play. I'm not sure how, and I'm not sure whether it's always for the good. There are times when I wish I'd shut up and my personality hadn't intruded, but I think there are probably, thoughtfully, that there are times when my personality is someone who is, anyway, my personality has probably been perfectly helpful. What my image to the staff is, I don't know. I think it varies, obviously, with different people. I think they consider me someone who has been where they are. I mean, I have been a reporter. I've been a Metro reporter. I've been a national reporter. I've been a foreign correspondent. I've held almost all those jobs. So I guess they think of me in that way. They think of me as someone who will fight their fights. I don't feel that I inspire fear. I mean, it's ridiculous. I have a feeling that there are other editors who have legendary tantrums and who are supposed to scream and stomp around. If I did that, I think people would laugh at me. But I suppose that some people, especially younger ones who come in now and have read all the crap that's been written, they might be sort of hold me in more awe than I hold myself. To fear, I don't feel feared. I suspect that I might be remembered more for being involved in starting the style section of the Washington Post than anything else. That's had as much impact on other newspapers, more impact than anything that has been done at the Post since I've been there. I think that the Post seems to me to be very comfortable with the fact that they're not looking for another Bradlee. I mean, I hope people will be sorry that I've gone, will be appreciative of what I've tried to do, but I think it'll be a blip. I think that the accident of holding the job that I hold gives me such enormous pleasure that it defies description. I mean, I've said it many times. I'd pay to work there if I could afford it. Stories, I think to take a paper that had just emerged, to play a role in the emerging of that newspaper from the difficulties it had when after Phil Graham died. I get enormous satisfaction out of that. I'm quite sure that I am more conservative in the sense of risk-taking than I was 21 years ago when I first came there. I had no reputation to worry about. I hadn't done it before, so I had no, there wasn't anybody around to tell me that you couldn't do this or couldn't do that, you couldn't hire this person or couldn't hire that person. So maybe I was more audacious. I think Catherine was too. I mean, I think she and I often wonder aloud whether she would hire me now. And I have my own idea as to the answer.
A personal recollection may be in order. Bradlee's famous, his courageous publisher Katharine Graham and the Washington Post are famous because of Watergate. But few remember, Bradlee certainly does, how lonely and beleaguered Bradlee, Graham, and the Washington Post were following Richard Nixon's landslide victory over George McGovern in November 1972. Nixon never appeared stronger, The Post had not had a major revelation on Watergate in weeks. The newspaper, along with Bradlee and Graham, were either way out ahead all by themselves with the greatest story of a lifetime, or were out there on a limb all by themselves, waiting for one of the greatest falls in journalistic history. I had lunch with Bradlee just before Christmas 1972 at the old Sans Souci restaurant in Washington. Bradlee's face was gray, his voice was gray, his mood was gray. I remember saying, "Tough time, isn't it?" Bradlee replied, "Pal, you'll never know just how tough." When he left the restaurant, I worried if Bradlee would survive. It was a useless concern. Bradlee not only survived, he ultimately prevailed. I'm Sander Van Oker. Thanks for joining us.